A happy Lord's Day morning to each and every one of you. Today is January 9th, and we are continuing on in our daily Bible reading, which today will be coming from Isaiah chapter 9. Again, today is January 9th, and we are going to be reading together Isaiah chapter 9. Thanks for tuning in today and looking forward to being with our Loudon Church family here in just a couple of hours. Today's reading in Isaiah chapter 9, of course, follows on the heels of Isaiah chapter 8. And if you remember, at the end of Isaiah chapter 8, we read that they will look down toward the earth and see only distress, darkness, and the gloom of affliction, and they will be driven into thick darkness. The end of chapter 8, here it leaves us with a pretty unfortunate and negative scene of total darkness. We're going to see how even in times of great distress and affliction and darkness, that there is still a seed of hope if the Lord will be relied upon, that the Lord is the provider of hope, even whenever everything seems as if it is lost. So let's read that together in Isaiah chapter 9. We're going to read about the hope of God, and then we will look at the example that is given concerning Judah, which is going to serve as the example of Israel, which is going to serve as Judah's warning of what happens whenever you trust in men over trusting in God. So let's read together here in Isaiah chapter 9. Nevertheless, the gloom of the distressed land will not be like that of the former times when he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will bring honor to the way of the sea, to the land east of the Jordan, and to the Galilee of the nations. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A light has dawned on those living in the land of darkness. You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy. The people have rejoiced before you as they rejoiced at harvest time and as they rejoice when dividing spoils. For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did on the day of Midian. For every trampling boot of battle and the bloody garments of war will be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will be on his shoulders. He will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. The dominion will be vast, and its prosperity will never end. He will reign on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish and sustain it with justice and righteousness from now on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. The Lord sent a message against Jacob. It came against Israel. All the people, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, will know it. They will say with pride and arrogance, the bricks have fallen, but we will rebuild with cut stones. The sycamores have cut down, but we will replace them with cedars. But the Lord raised up Rezin's adversaries against him and stirred up his enemies. Aram from the east and Philistia from the west have consumed Israel with open mouths. In all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is still raised to strike. The people did not turn to him who struck them. They did not seek the Lord of armies. So the Lord cut off Israel's head and tail, palm, branch, and reed in a single day. The head is the elder, the honored one. The tail is the prophet, the one teaching lies. The leaders of the people mislead them, and those they mislead are swallowed up. Therefore, the Lord does not rejoice over Israel's young men, and has no compassion on its fatherless widows, for everyone is a godless evildoer, and every mouth speaks folly. In all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is still raised to strike. For wickedness burns like a fire that consumes thorns and briars and kindles the forest thickets, so that they go up in a column of smoke. The land is scorched by the wrath of the Lord of armies, and the people are like fuel for the fire. No one has compassion on his brother. They carve meat on the right, but they are still hungry. They have eaten on the left, but they are still not satisfied. Each one eats the flesh of his arm. Manasseh eats Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh. Together both are against Judah. In all this, his anger has not turned away, and his hand is still raised to strike. You might have noticed a repeating phrase there at least 3 times within this chapter. We've actually seen it once prior in chapter 5 and verse 25. And it is the phrase that concludes verse 12, verse 17, and verse 21. His hand is still raised to strike. This is the Lord speaking concerning his ability and absolute willingness to punish those who reject him, to bring destruction and to bring destruction upon those who rebel against him. And again, I believe this section that we see here in Isaiah chapter 9, specifically beginning at verse 8, it is a warning to those in Judah that what you're going to see and what you have seen in what has taken place in Israel, that northern kingdom, that northern section of God's people that has rebelled, that sought to align themselves with Aram instead of trusting in the Lord, that what has happened to them will happen to you as well. If you are not faithful to him, if you do not trust in him, if you do not put your full confidence in him. And that, again, this whole section is that's really a repeating theme throughout a great deal of the prophetic literature that we're going to be reading this year, is the absolute necessity of trusting in God. And we see that from a number of different perspectives, number of different viewpoints from the various prophets that we're going to read as they deal with different situations in which God's people found themselves in. But really, at the end of the day, so much of it remains the same. The enemy might be different, the people involved might be different, but this point remains the same. Trust in the Lord. He will deliver you, but if you don't, he will also be the one to strike you. His hand is still raised to strike. Thank you for joining in today for today's daily Bible reading from Isaiah chapter 9. Again, looking forward to being with the Loudon Church family here in just a little bit, and looking forward to being with you again in the morning for our reading from Isaiah chapter 10 on Monday, January 10th. Thanks for taking the time to listen in and to think upon these important principles. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.